Hello, Internet, and welcome to another blockchain blog. Hey everyone, back with you today. In my backyard in a different location, but I wanted to share with you a slightly different video. Been thinking and talking a lot about blockchain and how do we get to the point where blockchain reaches mass adoption, global adoption, and some of the difficulty associated with explaining this to people who maybe aren't technologists and don't necessarily care about the constant march of technology. And it's really hard, I think, because so many people come from different backgrounds, right? And one thing I noticed early on with the Ethereum community was although people were interested in the software, they came from a whole variety of backgrounds and industries, and I would describe it as kind of like the moon rock landing on Earth, right? An asteroid or something from outer space, and everybody gathers around it not knowing exactly what it is, but it's different enough that we stand around it and point and stare and discuss and try to figure out exactly what it was. And I think that's kind of what we've been doing with blockchain, starting with Bitcoin, of course, 8 years ago, and now further discussion about public and private ledgers and different use cases of blockchains, and how to explain this to so many people, because it's not an elevator pitch, right? It's something that takes 20 minutes, an hour, and might take multiple kind of diving ins, if you will, to grasp the fullness of the vision of blockchain. But it got me to thinking about myself and how I got here to this point. And I'm sure people watching this video have heard my story at least once before about how I got into blockchain and the last few years, what took me down this path. But I was thinking a bit further back in my mind about how I got into computers more generally. And I'd have to say it was about 9 years old or so where I really started to get in more into programming and coding basic, and I never really considered myself a programmer per se, but I just was good with computers and I worked well with them and they worked well with me, and it just seemed to be a natural knack, so I took it up as a career. But one of the first impressions that, was very, very heavily weighed on me over the years is my first interaction with online services, starting with Prodigy. So Prodigy for DOS is how I first logged into a network before the World Wide Web became so prevalent like it is today. And in fact, I actually remember when Prodigy finally got to the graphical interface of Windows that finally we had a full-fledged web browser, and it got GIF 89A support. So that's basically animated GIFs, which are everywhere, or used to be everywhere on the internet. And I just remember that day of like, wow, the web started coming alive. Things were moving. It wasn't just a static list of documents and pictures and everything. It was like, it was real. And I think that's kind of where the point where I got that spark to start trying making a web page for myself. I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. I want to do this too. I want to see what I can make. And I think I put my first web page up online in about 1994. Very matrixy, kind of old school, black background, green text look and feel to it. Something that you could expect from a 12-year-old or so. But I remember playing with frames and links and graphics, and it was just really cool to me that I could do this and put it online, and anybody in the world, anywhere, at any time, can go to this address and see exactly what I want them to see, or what I'm trying to say, or information I'm trying to share. And I realized the power of this. I think this is something that we all tap into on the internet, right? The power of sharing and communicating. And one of the areas that I've become increasingly interested in is how blockchains can help content creators. I'm creating these videos in an effort to improve my content creation skills, right? Be less of a consumer, more of a producer, and generate content that's valuable, not just clickbait, but something that impacts people, they find meaningful or interesting, or in some way improves their lives. So I want to convey that message to people. And I'm trying to find the best way to do it. And I feel like at this point, the best way is just to tell my own story. Why blockchain is important to me, why I think it's important. I've talked a lot about different possibilities for blockchain, different industry impact, different news stories, governmental change, and so forth. And I really do believe in the power of the social change of blockchain. I do believe it is a opt-in system where we can choose to improve our own governance through self-organization and self-coordination. And I think a lot of those values are shared by people who use the internet, right? Do what you need to do to make yourself better, to improve yourself, to bring yourself more value. I think people across the world and religions and societies and countries can appreciate the kind of bootstrap efforts, but also keeping an eye on like helping your fellow man and being a good, kind human being. And those are some of the things that kind of attracts me to the Ethereum community. And I didn't feel like those values were held as tightly with the Bitcoin community, which is fine. I just can't spend all my time there because it gets me into a negative feedback loop. And I need that positivity to keep uplifting and creating and want to feel good about creating. So that aside, why blockchain is important to me. Like I said, I was never intended to be a programmer. I kind of found it through trade of needing to program things to make things work. So I started with basic static HTML web pages, and then a bit later in life I got into PHP and then MySQL databases, and really started furthering my career from that point, like making websites online and understanding the architecture that's necessary to support a website or an intranet app or any enterprise app, really. And I've spent a good deal of time in corporate scenarios working on those situations. But yeah, that infrastructure is really, really frail. It's absolutely amazing to me that we have supercomputer smartphones, right, in our pocket that are connected to the world's information. And, that makes you like a king would have been a year ago. Sorry, not a year ago, 100 years ago. But yeah, the amount of power and technology that we have today, I mean, just think about dishwashing machines, right? Washing machines, air conditioning. These are things that people 100 years ago really didn't have readily access to. And through some of the benefits of industrialization, this technology is more readily available than ever and gives people a kind of power that they didn't have, even though the amount of money that in their pocket might be decreasing, which I'm not arguing for. I do think there needs to be a stable platform for everybody. But even though that monetary value is decreasing, people are increasingly getting more and more value and benefit from the march of technology. You can spend probably as little as $200 on a pretty decent, capable smartphone, and it's become essentially the go-to number one item that people buy, right? Even homeless people have phones because it enables lots of business and communication and coordination that otherwise would not be feasible. And I think this is becoming to the point of a universal right and need, right? We need these systems to be reliable. We need the underlying technology, even though we all are not experts in it. We need that technology to be there for us when we need it. And, we've seen instances where Amazon just went down the other week. Their S3 service really screwed up a bunch of sites. And that's not the first time. I started kind of going down this path of decentralization when there were some DNS problems with Amazon. I looked into creating a service for DNS record synchronization across name servers. Realized the market was pretty small for that, but kind of led me down a trail of seeking technological decentralization for resiliency, right? When I put a web page online, I don't want to really have to worry about the servers and the bandwidth and memory and CPU and all of those things that somebody has to deal with. Some operations or DevOps or whatever the department may be called, someone has to take the programmer's code and put it online for a production ready site. And it's not really fun. I've made a career out of working in that space because not many people know how to do it or are inclined to do it. And I find the mix of hardware and software fun and interesting. But there are a lot of tools, and I've slowly automated myself out of a job as I found it less and less interesting. And I instead want to focus my time on helping make the internet a more resilient place, right? The internet is real in terms of it affects our daily lives. Everybody uses Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those things. Okay, not everyone, right? Only half of the world's 7 billion people are online, but that's expected to grow. 3.5 billion people is a pretty big target market. So as we depend on this more and more, because it is such a useful tool, we technologists have to make sure the fundamental layers that underlie everything are secure and resilient and flexible and private, right? We need privacy on the internet that we don't have today. And the problem is basically everything we built is based on legacy 1970s, 1960s technology. We're in 2017 now. It's been 40, 50 years. I think we've learned a couple of things. The internet supports a much larger generation of people. People born after 1995 have never lived in a world where the internet has not been a part of their conscious life. We need to retool the internet to be there for artists to create, right? And for people in unstable government places to be able to post information in a, free speech enabling way, a censorship resistant way. These are like fundamental human necessities. Sending money to people, remitting it across borders is becoming increasingly important as workers migrate, as people travel around the world. And how are we going to really solve these problems? Looking at the political climate, I think it's very clear that pursuing the traditional route of bureaucracies is not going to fix the internet, right? We've relied on geeks and nerds and techies to build the tools on the internet that make it so fun and cool and on your mobile everywhere with video. The bureaucrats aren't going to fix that. Us technologists are going to have to. And sure, there's a whole side game of cryptocurrency and the value and interest thereof. Part of my interest really with Ethereum is being able to build better platforms on the internet that never go offline. And for me, that's a worthwhile endeavor on its own. If I can make some money out of that process because everybody's got to eat, I think that's fantastic. And I think we are on the edge of birthing a new industry that can support not just one or two people, but hundreds or thousands of people. There is a lack of people who know how to deal with blockchains, and I want to help change that. Whether their interest is keeping the internet more private, more secure, more resistant to hacking, maybe it's more tuned towards content creation and being rewarded for that, right? Rather than going through iTunes or Spotify or some other services that take a decent cut, we have the technology and tools to build that for ourselves. And if that means a larger portion goes to artists, then where's the problem with that, right? There's a lot of different angles. Of course, the efficiency of back-end systems that enterprises and corporations are looking into, the possibility of having a shared database state that no one individually controls, right? So you move that element of trust, but you all share it together. I think that's a very powerful idea, and businesses are starting to pick up on that. And of course, there's the money aspect, right? No one can deny that cryptocurrency is a new kind of asset that has been very hard to categorize. And some people are just not super interested in the theory of money, or not attuned to how to invest, or don't have the time for it. Maybe they're not sending money back home. The money aspect is interesting to a lot of people, but it's not the end-all be-all for everyone. And although I do believe in magic internet money as being just as good as or better than other money systems, especially on the internet, we're going to need a native currency money format that exists purely online. It is not tied to credit card addresses and stuff, because the internet knows no borders. I think that Bitcoin's a supernatural fit, or Dash, or Ethereum, or whatever the millions of other coins are. I think those would be great reasons to have magic internet money that we can all trust and use, because blockchain never goes down. It's totally resilient. It's censorship resistant. Just the kind of properties of peer-to-peer and decentralization, both in a technological and political kind of way, I think is worthy of discussion and interest of society at large. I personally believe that we can transplant some of these ideas and technology into government or organizing between ourselves without having to involve government, right? If we think about government as a tool, we now have technology to self-govern in a more efficient, effective way that happens much faster than the old red tape kind of way that we're used to. So thinking back to what I was talking before about how people have access to more technology, more tools today, it's as if they were a king 100 years ago. I think the same thing is going to happen with blockchain technology and governance if we allow it. The micronation, nation state, geopolitical border situation that we have as an idea is only a couple hundred years old. And I don't know that it's going to hold for centuries or millennia. I think that we're going to need more decentralized ideas that are less top-down directed. That was a very efficient communication stream when communication was hard and by word of mouth. But now I can live broadcast this video or any other to people all across the world, and millions or billions of people can watch it all at the same time. That's pretty amazing. And just to give that a little bit of scope, the number one watched television event, at least in America, maybe the world, was the finale of MASH. And this was for a few reasons, but it's something like 130 million Americans or something like that were watching TV all the same exact moment in time. Not streaming on pay-per-view or watch later or Netflix. There was none of that, right? There was no even cable network. You had your choice of 3, maybe 4 networks, and that's part of the reason why so many people were listening in on that one channel. But now you turn to YouTube, and this is one channel amongst millions of others, right? We totally skipped the part of unbundling cable and having individual choice of I want to buy this channel and that channel. Like, that never happened, but we just skipped them. We made that paradigm obsolete and we went straight to the internet, and YouTube is the new TV. There's literally a service called YouTube TV. They're gonna have original content like Netflix and Amazon and others. This is the new world. The old world is fading away in some ways. It's not going to go away, and there are lots of generations of people that are still alive that are going to hold on to that. But there's an entire new generation of people being born that have never known life without the internet. And that changes the way they think about things. And I think it should change the way that we think about things too.